Frostpunk. Or as it's known by its street name. Ugh, this game. No, look, I jest, but I have a very love-hate relationship with this week's title. Frostpunk centers itself around a fictional ice age set in the 1800s. For anyone who loves steampunk aesthetics and music, oh boy are you gonna love the art style of this game. It is hands down one of the most beautiful games ever made, in any genre. And I'll stand by that. In your shanty town of wooden streets and tents, you rule as captain, passing laws and making decisions to keep your citizens alive, and perhaps more importantly, compliant. The Frostpunk tutorial is simple and conducive to gameplay, unlike others which tend to railroad city management. It's easy to assign your workers and engineers to the scattered resources lying about the glacier, and for a group of fresh nomads who recently left stone buildings and civilization, the citizens are surprisingly upbeat to begin with and go about their assigned tasks with admirable diligence. But, just like your food rations, that ain't gonna last. You want to get your food supply happening ASAP through the cookhouse and hunters' huts. Raw food gets turned into food rations, but be aware the cookhouse has a very low base heating level, so you're going to want to chuck this as close to your generator as possible to keep the food production happening when it gets colder. Because people weirdly get cranky when you try to force feed them sawdust. You want to be opening fighting pits and pubs and brothels to keep them happy and working. Passing laws is essential to granting yourself more tools to keep the hope and discontent bars in check. Some laws are requested by your citizens themselves through the promises and request story bubbles that pop up over the city. Fail to deliver on these promises of food and shelter and heat and they will just boot you from the city. Oddly enough, the central mechanic in a climate-themed ice game is heat. The generator makes up the center of your colony as well as its main source of heating and executions. Fights break out at its base, protests are held, morning gatherings and propaganda announcements. Coal is the lifeblood of your generator, as food rations are for your people. When the coal stops, so does the heat. And when the temperature falls, people get sick. They die. They stop showing up for work. The economy collapses. Keep that coal flowing, or feel the boot of your citizens meet your backside as they yeet you into the storm and take their chances with whoever's next. Heating levels, shown here in this handy little overlay, display whether your buildings are toasty, cozy, livable, cold, or South Australia in July. The warmer your buildings, the safer and happier your citizens are. Through the use of generator upgrades and steam hubs researched at your workshop by your precious engineers, you can carefully plan your city and its living quarters around the warmer spots of your glacial settlement. But this, however, is made harder by the drops in temperature as the little ice age increases its grip on the land. Starting at a balmy -10 and eventually, spoilers, freezing your boots off at over -100 during the climactic event of the game, it progressively gets more and more difficult to keep the city of New London from turning into steampunk-flavoured super-dupers. The demands on your technology and research requires critical thinking and planning to ensure you're equipping your city with the right gear for the warms. The economy tab is also super helpful for visual representation on gain and consumption of valuable resources. As heaters, steam hubs, and generator power levels increase their coal usage, so does this tab reflect that against your gain. The use of this page is crucial for maintaining steady increases of wood, coal, steel, and food. You'll also want to keep an eye on your depots to make sure that you can store excess resources for upgrades and unexpected events. The scout teams you assemble at the beacon are essential for exploring the Frostland. Across the small overland map are points of interest, and there you will find resources, people, and sometimes story. Discovering what happened to the other teams that set out from New London, finding other settlements, having this heckin' dude arrive from a failed city and set a running timer on your citizens panicking about the same fate befalling them, and your scouts can also find and collect steam cores, a precious resource required for certain buildings, such as higher tier mines and infirmaries, and automatons. Automatons. This word is always beyond me. Upon finding your first automaton in the Frostland, you can set this incredible machine to work and release your citizens from some of the chillier workplaces on the frontiers of your city. Through the building of a factory, you can then construct your own auto-tomato, and even rename them, though they come with some pretty cool names already. I love this game. As the snow and ice encroaches across the glacier, your citizens come to realize that maybe leaving an established city of stone and glass may not have been the greatest of ideas. Dissent will begin to sweep through your city and, unless put to bed with batons or faith, threatens to break apart the fragile settlement from the inside out. Hard choices have to be made to keep the relative peace as your engineers and scouts report that things are only going to get worse. Choosing between two different paths of order will tempt you with crossing the line to keep your city in check while trying to keep a shred of humanity. It's a careful balance that is easily mismanaged, and the game will let you know. It's also very easy to get overwhelmed with your citizens' requests and promises, and extra points if you promise warmth for a certain time and then the temperature lowers another 20 degrees and everybody blames you. Unlike most city builders, Frostpunk has a definitive end. Throughout the gameplay, the narrative is marked by milestones to keep everything moving forward. The weather event that caps your reign as benevolent director will test your city to the limits, as well as your feels. I maintain that The City Must Survive is hands down one of the most gorgeous pieces of game music composed in recent history. Combined with the sounds of cracking ice and howling wind, I can genuinely say it elevates stress levels akin to your fuel light blinking on in the middle of nowhere and driving white-knuckled to the nearest servo. I'm not going to play the song for you here. I honestly believe this is best experienced playing the game for the first time. But I'm not lying when I said I had tears in my eyes while trying to keep my city running, my coal mines open, and my generator, my beautiful warm generator, running throughout the storm. You know, I don't talk much about story theme in these reviews because it's not often the opportunity comes across my desk. Frostpunk, however, does provide me that opportunity. And I'd like to argue that the two themes of this game are equality through global catastrophe and the necessity of humanity in service to survival. Let's go through the two. The opening cutscene drives home theme number 1, equality through global catastrophe. When the frost hit, it didn't discriminate. No matter how wealthy or unfortunate you were, your circumstances became equal with your neighbours. Rich and poor were forced out into the storm and forced to work side by side. This theme crops up from time to time, especially in the DLC packs, which are equally awesome and will be featured in a separate video. It's an interesting concept and one that is especially relevant to our everyday life. Global catastrophe does not discriminate. We all end up on the glacier. Theme number 2, the necessity of humanity in service to survival. When we walk the knife's edge of life and death, does our need to do the right thing, the good thing, serve us? Or is it better to let the bears eat the survivors, turn the sickly refugees away, allow the father to go after his frightened daughter into the storm? Does our humanity, our inclination to help and rescue and save, threaten our survival in this frozen city? And what are the consequences of losing that humanity? Story-wise, this is a fantastic theme. Why are good people good, even when it doesn't particularly serve them? Integrity over blind loyalty, inconvenient morality. Frostpunk, though frustrating at times, is one of the most hauntingly beautiful games to come across my desk in almost a decade of gameplay. From the visual art, the sound design, the soundtrack, it all ties into a tapestry of hope in the bleakest of times. The choices you're forced to make as leader, the sacrifices and the promises broken, the questions it forces you to ask and answer. When I first played this game, I thought it harsh, cruel, and unyielding. I struggled to find the value beyond the aesthetics of the game. But now, with a few gameplays under my belt, I get it. It's the story of humanity at its limits. As captain, protector of the truth, or dictator, will you cross the line? Remember, the city must survive.